But anyways, Star Wars.
Okay.
So what's your experience with um, this really um, amazing science fiction universe?
Okay. So um, when I saw it in the cinema at first, I was 5 years old, and it was the first film I'd ever seen in the cinema. This was 1977. No, this would be 1978 because Star Wars was released in the States in 1977, and then it very slowly came to the UK. I think it had its premiere in January 1978, and then it slowly moved around the UK. You couldn't get away from it. It was absolutely everywhere. It was Star Wars. Everyone was talking about it. All the kids, but there was no spoilers. It was there was no internet back then. There was no like newspapers didn't publish in-depth reviews of it or anything else like that before it came out. It was very much you. I remember it was the first film I ever went to see. 5 years old with my dad. So my dad took me. I remember there was an enormous queue. So we had a huge queue. We had that experience to get in. And then I'd never been to the cinema before because the only other films that would be in the cinema at that kind of time were like James Bond films or other horror films and things like this. Had never really been anything like Star Wars. Star Wars was the first blockbuster and also the first film that created real excitement. Like you have to remember the other films were this was like the same kind of era where Batman was on the
Yeah.
television, but it was the bang whack pow Batman, so everything was very, comic books weren't very serious, films weren't, it was either serious or not serious, like Halloween or something like that, which I wasn't going to go and see. But then 5 years old, you go in, you see Star Wars, you have to queue up. I was massively excited. I'd never been to the cinema before, so this was not just like my first experience of Star Wars. It was also my first kind of experience of the cinema, of seeing something on the big screen. In addition to that as well, nothing ever had a budget. Nothing was ever as big budget as Star Wars. Like if you watch something on the television. So I mean, I went from watching kids programs like Mr. Ben and things like that to all of a sudden I'm in the cinema. I've queued up maybe an hour with my dad. I remember that distinctly. There was a massive queue. I'd never seen a queue in that part of my town before. So the queue came right out of the cinema, and then I mean, Star Wars itself, the film. Uh, like I say, I've never experienced anything like it. So 1 minute I'm like a 5-year-old kid, I'm totally innocent. The next minute there's the opening crawl, there's the music, there's the big Star Wars logo, and then the stormtrooper. We have the spaceship going overhead, which seemed to last forever and ever and ever. And then you have the stormtroopers coming in, and the stormtroopers explode through the door, and they're shooting at you. You're like a 5-year-old kid sitting in the cinema, going, "Wow!" The whole experience is literally completely mind blowing. Like you kind of had to be there because it could
Yeah,
never really be reproduced. Darth Vader. I remember Darth Vader was
yeah,
such a presence on the big screen. His head was massive. It was right in front of you. The only thing I remember of the film itself, was Darth Vader spinning off into space at the end of the big fight at the end. I remember him spinning off and then sort of correcting and flying off, and I was thinking, "Oh, good, I'll be seeing him again." But then that was it. And everybody came um, out of the cinema, all the kids of my age. And you have to remember, I'm in a provincial little town. So I wasn't in Hollywood. I wasn't in Los Angeles. I was just in this little town in the middle of nowhere in England, miles away from anything. But even then, it had this massive, incredible effect on me. Everything after that was Star Wars for the rest of my life. As a kid, Star Wars comics, Star Wars figures. Star Wars, if someone gave a sticker away in breakfast cereal, I had to have that breakfast cereal. If there was anything ever on the television about Star Wars, my mum, Mark, Star Wars on the telly, and I'd run downstairs and watch whatever it was. Everything after that, I mean, I started to grow out of it at about the time of Return of the Jedi. But before of that, it was Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars. Empire Strikes Back was the next sort of step in the thing. What we did between Star Wars and the Empire Strikes Back is we waited for the Empire Strikes Back. We collected all the stickers. There were bubblegum cards where you got the bubblegum and then the cards that made the puzzle, the Star Wars figures. Everything was like that. Our whole life was Star Wars, you know. That's how my experience of Star Wars. That's the OG vanilla 1970s kid Star Wars experience for you, as best as I could describe it. You know, it knocked us for six. It was a punch in the head in the cinema. It was relentless. The stormtroopers came in, pow, 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 and you were like that. This is incredible, and it never really took its foot off the gas. That first film, you know, it went. If you ask me, it can't be beaten. It can't be beaten. Can't the first film because you were
We'll
so
see.
in that moment and with the heroes. They were your heroes. Even later, when I bought the Star Wars figures, if I got a Luke Skywalker, that wasn't a figure of Luke Skywalker. That was Luke Skywalker. My figure was Luke Skywalker. You know, to have all these adventures with and to play with and everything else like that. It's always been like that for me. You know, like I say, about 12, 13, I thought I was growing out of Star Wars. I don't think you ever really do because it's such a big thing. And then,
I
you know, I imagine your experience is very different because you're a prequel guy, you
yeah.
told me. So I can only imagine you saw the originals on video and then, or DVD or whatever, and then went, you know, you're
What
20
happened?
years behind me with this. So that was my
What happened?
experience. You guys tell me yours.
Okay. Well, our dad was 23 when Star Wars came out. He saw it in theaters. He fell in love. He was always a Flash Gordon, a Captain America, Superman, like John Wayne type of fan. Even the way he walked was a lot like John Wayne. So he carry himself around like that. And but he made sure we saw uh, the Star Wars originals as kids on VHS. The problem was, at least for me, I liked episode four, but then like I liked episode five to a point, but I also found on the second or third viewing, I found the three originals boring as a kid. I'm not excusing myself. I'm just explaining. I never got really into it, but then the same thing happened. Episode one, there was those trailers that came out, and we how do I explain it? We we were gonna see it opening weekend, but then all like the lineup going out down the hill because theater was on a hill in Sudbury, where our hometown is, because it was a large enough city. Down the hill and to the lights, and our dad saw that, and he was driving us to his place because our parents were divorced at the time, and he just started cussing and saying, "Oh, I'm destroy them." And you have our oldest brother going, "Calm down, Dad. Why are you cussing so much? You have to see Star Wars in theaters. You have to." He's like, he's ballistic. And he's like, "I saw it. You have to." And it's like, we don't have to do anything, Dad. You do. I don't want you to miss this. And uh, but then 2 weeks later, the crowds were thinned out and only up to the parking lot. And our dad almost declared forfeit. But then our oldest brother, who always had to backtalk him, was like, "Well, guess we're gonna have to give up." And yeah, our dad, because our oldest brother took that attitude, he took the opposite attitude and said, "You know what? No, we're not gonna give up. You do that too easily." And our oldest brother went, "No, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't." That went back and forth for a bit, and then I think it was Dan who was like, there's more people joining the lineup. So, we go into the lineup. We wait outside for like half an hour. We get in, and like we then go to see Star Wars Episode 1. And I remember just kind of going, well, this is just going to be more of Episode 5 and 6, and I was kind of like, do I have to show up for this? But then, lights dim. You see a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Music kicks off, and what shocked me was, I started to kind of off, but like glance around. We just have the discussion between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. Then the ship blows up, and suddenly it's lightsabers flashing. They have to fight their way through the Federation and whatnot. For me, that was the real first Star Wars moment, and I was awestruck. And the thing I remember most, though, of course, like I was amazed at the pod racing. I was amazed at the plot, at the reveal of Padme. But what amazed me most was, and I think Dan, it was also amazing for him. Our dad just went like that, like a kid. When Darth Maul, at the end, he takes his cloak off, pulls out his lightsaber, and activates the side. We just went, oh my gosh.
The coolest thing ever.
Yeah, I remember everybody going, everybody in theaters gasping and just going. And you had like someone, old lady, I think, like, oh my. And you just have, in turn, you've got like, well, lightsabers flash life and the music kicks off. And I remember just going on the way, because I was the most reluctant, I think, of all of us. Dan was more like, okay, this is going to be cool because it's peace. Dan was always a mediator at that age. You just wanted to keep peace in the family. Chris, our oldest brother, was kind of, because our dad was excited, he didn't want to be excited. So, like,
and our older brother Chris, him and our dad shared pretty much the exact same
taste in movies.
And that was the one thing they bond over.
You see, I was the one who was going, I don't want to see this as well. I was like, I'm not going to see this. I'm not going to like this. But then I'm the one dancing around playing as though going woof, woof, and then on the way to the car.
And then when it finally came out on DVD, I think it was
VHS,
that you kept
watching it and rewatching,
especially the pod racing part.
No, that and the lightsaber duel at the end.
Yeah, but you obsessed the moment.
Yeah, and this. But the thing is, I saw politics. I kind of moment as well, because I saw it and I was going, I don't understand any of this. This is too mature for me. The first moment at 9 years old where I realized I don't understand this.
Guys, your audio is coming in and out. I'm not sure if your speakers, if your microphones are positioned properly.
Can you hear me?
I'm not getting you. Yeah, but it like comes in and out when you start talking.
Okay. All right, I'll try again. The thing is, what Dan said. What Dan said was that I was the one who kept replaying when we got it on VHS the
pod
racing and last duel at the end, the duel of fate. When we saw this movie, the politics scenes, I know, bothered a lot of people. But what's interesting to me is that at 9, I looked at this and I went, I'm not old enough to understand this. I will need to wait years before I can. And then when I actually watched it, like 4 years later, I went, because I kept rewatching, but that's when it first clicked in. And I went, oh my gosh, this is interesting. And I understood the lore and I understood everything. But the thing is, I then started collecting all the books, all the comics, all the stuff, and our dad was uber excited. He was happy. And whenever we go to the bookstore, he would encourage me to pick up the next Star Wars book. He wanted me to read nothing but Star Wars. But episode 2 rolled around. I was disappointed.
Okay. Weren't we all?
Romance. I was like 11, and I was like, nah, girl, blah, do we need that? But then I rewatched it, and I eventually went, oh, now I understand the plot. Oh, I was dumb. Okay. And episode 3 was the last real time where our entire all three of us brothers and our dad went to the movie together. So episode 3 has a lot of value to us, and that was the movie that kind of brought us all together as a family because we were united by then. We reconnected a lot over that movie, and of course we all loved the last duel, the Battle of the Heroes, and it's still my favorite lightsaber scene. But I also think that the philosophical conflict between Obi-Wan and Anakin was something that has stayed with me in my writing and whatnot, because this is something I really loved about the prequels, was that every duel was like a philosophical battle. The Duel of Fates is over the fate of Anakin and Obi-Wan. It's not just Anakin, but Obi-Wan's fate is tied in. Which way will it go for him? And you have the duel between Dooku and the duo and Yoda. You have the philosophy. It's the philosophy between Dooku, who thinks victory by any means necessary, and he wants supremacy over the galaxy. In turn, Obi-Wan and Anakin are faltering in their beliefs, whereas Yoda's faltering, but it's still his show in a way over the galaxy. But in episode 3, you get the duel between Obi-Wan and Vader, where it's about it's basically about Vader, whether his ideals are right or Obi-Wan's ideals are correct. And as it turns out, Obi-Wan is more correct. So, and I kind of look at the Luke and Vader duel that way as well in episode 6, in that it's a duel between the idea of, does filial piety matter? Does fatherhood matter? And Luke proves it does. And that's why that duel is important. So I can actually I like the originals. I mean, as far as characters go, I kind of like Luke and Kyle Katarn from the Jedi Knight games. We got into thanks to a family friend a lot more than I do a lot of the characters in the prequels. But I do love Obi-Wan in his prime more than I like Ben. I really do like Anakin, but Luke and Kyle have staying power with me for some reason. It's just the way the characters are. But weirdly, I kind of like Obi-Wan more than Han Solo, but it's just I like Han, but there's something about Obi-Wan's journey from apprentice to asshole father who takes his kid for granted and kind of abuses him verbally, to being dad of the year, which is kind of inspiring in a way. So these movies are things you have to experience in theaters as a kid in order to really get sucked in, I think.
One thing that I'm glad that our dad shared with us is that he loved all 6 original movies.
Oh yeah.
It's like original trilogy versus prequel. That's not something that
ever occurred to him, because he saw the movies as there's the beginning of the story with episode 1 all the way to episode 6. He kind of viewed it as one big cinematic adventure. And I think he did end up at one point probably watching all 6 in one sitting. It's the sort of thing he would do.
Yeah, there were times where Herod, to get home from work, okay, I've got several days off. I'll just binge it.
Binge it.
and then binge Indiana Jones right after.
And then he binged like another 6 movies just for fun. He was a binge watcher before I was a fan.
Did he watch? Did he like the Indiana Jones films as well? Because I have a little theory I want to test on you, because you look at these things very philosophically, and I have an idea that Indiana Jones is Han Solo. Is basically the exact same character. What they did is, you can imagine like Han Solo falling into another dimension and being Indiana Jones, and kind of doing that until Chewbacca arrives to pick him up. You know, like when the guy comes in with the swords, and Indiana Jones shoots him. That's exactly the same thing that Han Solo would do if he was fighting a Jedi. If there was a Jedi waving a lightsaber around, Han Solo would go, blaster, pew, you know, and that would so I had this. There was kind of like a not quite the longest wait between the Star Wars films, because you got Indiana Jones to stretch them out a little bit, if you know what I mean. Like you got your Han Solo fix with Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
I know they were very different, but to me, it's the same guy. It's the same character. It's Han Solo with a different hat, basically. You know?
Yeah. I think the charm of Han is that, well, the only thing that's different between Indy and Han is that Indiana Jones is more like a warrior archetype, while Han is more of the lover's archetype.
Okay. They're both very shouty. They both go, Willie, you gotta do this and you gotta do that. And, you know, like Han's the same. He's like, get in the ship, get Chewie, get us out of here. And sort of action, shout, and sort of he never pauses for breath, doesn't Han Solo or Indiana Jones. There's always if he jumps in a plane, it's got a snake in it. Hey, what's this snake doing here? You know, and that was all the you know, you got all of that with the Indiana Jones films as well. And then in the 90s, I mean, that's when I grew up. So you went from Star Wars to Indiana Jones, but then you got Predator, RoboCop. Then you got all the Arnold Schwarzenegger films, The Terminator, Starship Troopers, and things like this. So there wasn't really you didn't have to, you know, there was no missing 10 years in between Star Wars, the originals, and Star Wars, the prequels, because you had things that were filling them in, and those you kind of grew as they grew. Like I could never have watched RoboCop when I was 5. It would have blown my mind, you know. But when I was 15, I was like, wow, this is the film for me, you know. I mean, I was very lucky in that I saw Star Wars in the cinema when I was 5, so I had the full experience. In 1986, I remember 1 week I went to the cinema and it was Predator, and then the week after I went to the cinema and it was RoboCop. So I was like, wow, you know. I think about another thing, but maybe a few weeks before, it was Aliens. There was always something, you know what I mean? There was always these incredible films. And then we got the prequels. And I remember, obviously, I was the first guy in the cinema to see The Phantom Menace. I didn't love it like I love the Star Wars films until the doors opened. Darth Maul's standing there, takes the hood back. He's got a double lightsaber. And the whole cinema went, yes. You know what I mean? Because that was Star Wars. That exact moment was like the bit that we were waiting for, like you guys said, you know. And then what was the other thing? As you pointed out, Attack of the Clones kind of dipped, but not that much. It wasn't too bad. But then Revenge of the Sith was a great film. It's one of those ones that you can watch over and over and over again. Everything that happens in it is very good, you know. And then unfortunately, we then got the sequels, which I don't know if we discuss them now or we save them for another day. But you know, what did you think of those other films in the meantime, like RoboCop, Predator, those kind of things?
RoboCop I've not yet watched. I tried as a kid. I couldn't get into it.
Wow.
I'll have to watch it. Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
If you like psychology, if you like the psychology of heroes and stuff, then RoboCop is the one that they make you watch on all your media studies courses and everything else. That's really very deep. Is RoboCop really deep?
I saw it as a kid. I enjoyed it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I was that kid that watched that cartoon, but it's been a while, like at least
Yeah.
10, 15 years since I've watched.
As to Predator, it's one of my favorite sci-fi horror movies, maybe even the favorite sci-fi horror. But weirdly, kind of like Predator 2 a little more in some ways, because it's just, there's more, like, they're awesome in different ways. Like, Predator 1, you're watching people who are the top of the game, the greatest in war, being hunted down like cattle.
Okay.
While Predator 2, I like it because it's more urban setting, it's more, uh, it's a slow burner, and I really like slow burner horror. So for me, there's that mountain horror as we are working our way to the end. I really love that. I think though, and real quick about the Harrison Ford thing, one of the things I always hated was that now in the sequel novels they were as bad as the sequel movies, in my opinion. They had had one great son, Anakin Solo, and it was, like they were grooming him to be a great Jedi. They killed him off. There was a lot of missed opportunities with stories, and then they scrambled to try it. No, they were postmodernists, so they killed off a character they needed for later stories, and then they're scrambling and they're just mucking up every story until they can just say, whatever, we give up almost. The thing is, they did not bother writing stories about when Han was raising this kid, where Han's gallivanting around the galaxy with his son, who has a lightsaber, and Chewbacca, and this was one of the things which I remember as a kid going, "Oh, I want to see that in the theaters." And I'm like, and then as a young boy, well, as a teen, I was like, "Why aren't they trying to produce this as a video game or as a movie or TV series?" Because I mean, there's Harrison Ford; he's still young enough. Like, they need to rush this into production before he's too old. They never did. But this was one of the things I think they should have done in the '90s. Is rather than a young Indiana Jones series, a Han and Son series
Okay.
where
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Good idea.
where like you have Anakin or Annie and Han just gallivanting around, and Han has to be the mature parental figure, and Luke and Leia might come in and out of the series and whatnot because Leia's busy with her career, and of course she's a Jedi Knight, and she's Leia Solo. Like, you can't have Han without her. But the the problem is that um, they were building up other parts of the franchise of Star Wars, and you know Harrison Ford was building for himself his career outside of Lucas in film. So, you know, these things happen, but it's a shame we didn't get Han and Son or something. That would have been awesome. But, gonna have to. Well, the thing is, us writers can always write a character like Han or Dread Pirate Roberts or Mad Mardigan or whatever, and make him the dad, and just write that into fiction novels and whatnot. But I but I think the thing with Star Wars is that I would argue, I remember thinking it's the one science fiction universe that best captured wonder, where, like the worlds are wonderful and wondrous. The characters are fools and great heroes and whatnot, and the villains are dastardly and whatnot. And it's like fantasy, but I've never been able to think that it's fantasy. I've always in my head had it squared as uh, peak science fiction, and um, and that, well, I got into all the video game comics and books as a kid, so I noticed the history was cyclical. Like the Jedi would beat the Sith would come back, they'd do it the whole thing again. Sith would get the upper hand, start slaughtering all the Jedi would get the upper hand. It was cyclical, and it first introduced me to the idea of history as a cyclical thing, that we're living in a loop. And this is where there's a lot of philosophy in Star Wars, and it's something that, how do I put it? Um, that I don't think Disney put any thought into when they made their movies because they were more concerned with, subverting it and deconstructing it and turning it into a cash cow that they could just squeeze like a piggy bank, rather than the philosophical arguments and ideas that Lucas has. Was
And the
basically told,
politics. You mentioned the
yeah,
politics as well in the first, and in the first one there was no. Sorry, in the prequels, the politics were important. They put them in there, and whether you liked them or not, you had to sit through it, and it worked. There was these
mm,
people making speeches in the Senate and everything else like that. And I remember I was an adult when I saw them, but I was thinking, wow, this is quite brave. You know what I mean? You might as well be watching Prime Minister's Question Time. And to put that in a kid's film and say, look, the action's important, but the politics is important as well, because they're
mm,
fighting not just in, with laser swords and with out in space and everything, but there's a government. You know what I mean? You have to see how this world works. For you to buy into it, you have to see how this universe works, not just on the scale of look out, pew pew, and all this kind of stuff, but also like, okay, we're going to govern by doing it like this, by fear, and the people are going to rebel by trying to do it like this, by making these speeches, by trying to. I remember there's a bit of think in the first one or the second one or something where they have a vote of no confidence in one of the chancellors to get him replaced with like their guy, sort of thing. And I was thinking, wow, this is very brave, that they're bothering, with this kind of sort of stuff. So you didn't just see the space scenes and the action and everything. You also saw things like political maneuvering, intrigue, things like that, which obviously you also see in like Lord of the Rings and things like that. But you can't make a universe believable without having this kind of thing. It's like when I watch Andor and everyone's got jobs, you know what I mean? And they're all fixing spaceships because that's kind of like what job can we give all these people in the future? They're going to have to fix spaceships or do things like that. That was the first series. In the second series, they kind of expanded that. They'd had a bit of a thing. Okay, people work in security, people work in this. We got limo drivers, we got things like that. I think then, as we're moving on, we're starting to get a bit more imaginative. But like you said, in the prequels, the politics, yeah, kids were sat there going, "What the hell is this?" But it was important for even when you go back 5 years later and you go, now I see what they were doing. You know, I think that was a very good point that you made about the prequels.
and it's one of the few things that when I made it to a certain point, like when like by the time I was drenched in the lore, like where I knew what characters, there were limo drivers, there was all that in the prequel novels. My the three came out after I blasted through my youth on Battlefront 2 and whatnot, and played all the Jedi Knight games. By 2006, I went back and watched the originals, and I will admit, I felt annoyed. Moreover, okay, so we've got one great politics scene in episode 4. Like how will the Emperor has dissolved the Imperial Senate? Well, how will he dissolve? How will he run the galaxy without the Senate? Well, the regional governors will run this. The problem is, I then realized Palpatine basically just made it a free for all. It's now Sengoku Jidai. He dissolved his own political authority without realizing it. And you then go, oh, he's gotten dumber because old age has caught up with him, and his mental acuity is fading. But then the problem is with episode 5 and 6 is that I had forgotten them by that time, and I rewatching it. I'm going, I want more. Where's my politics scenes?
Yeah.
So there was that difference. But then when I then picked up the episode 4, 5, and 6 novels because I went, the ones from 1976, 79,
Mm-hmm.
I think 82. I said, well, I'm going to read these because I want to see what this is all about. And like, is there some stuff in these books that's not in the movie, in the 3 movies? So then I find out through the book that like midichlorians was supposed to be in episode 4, I find out there are some political scenes, but you also have Vader who's quietly threatening Tarkin, and Tarkin was supposed to be a little afraid of Vader. That doesn't show in the movie. And you have like the episode 6 books, which were brilliantly written, and I kind of went, oh, so a lot of stuff didn't make it onto the screen. Well, okay, now I understand. Well, there goes all my criticism because clearly, I needed to read more about this stuff and learn more before I can judge the originals. So that was something that was interesting. And now I can say that I might be odd, but I kind of prefer, like, I watch episodes 1 through 4, although I will read the episode 4 novel, and then I'll just typically jump into episode 5 and 6 novels because I just find, I don't know why I just prefer it that way, because although I miss the James Earl Jones, like the scene of him grabbing the blaster from Han Solo and going, "We would be honored if you would join us." I love that scene. But
That's like the
yeah,
Indiana Jones scene with the guy with the
yeah,
with the things, like Darth Vader's standing there, Han Solo, quick as a flash, squeezes a few shots off, and then he gets the blaster off him. So yeah, there's the parallels, that are always there in everything that Harrison Ford does. Really, I think he's got his own kind of school of acting, hasn't he? Really, like Harrison Ford is very, like when he gets smashed to the ground and he has a kind of little look round before he sort of manages to get back up. It's always he always does the same kind of things, which is probably what you want. I did have a question. If you ever watched the original 3, do you watch the ones with the directors, the special editions with all the extra bits, or do you watch the you can download despecialized versions? Which would you prefer of those out of the original Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi? I mean, for me, I always watch the despecialized
I like
editions.
I like the specialized because um, I like George's vision.
Okay.
It's just I actually think that we should have gotten director's cuts for these films, um, because I don't go in wanting to watch like for me. I guess I just view it as uh, like I've read the books, so like in '76, George had a lot of ideas that never made it into the final movie. It's much more psychological, and like Ben is supposed to be a chain smoker. He's smoking death sticks. And so that's in episode 2, he says, "You don't want to sell me death sticks." Later, Ben gets hooked on them. And so, there's that nuance. Um, there's a lot of stuff, like, I'm glad they didn't have the smoking stuff in the movie, but I think um, I like seeing Han like step on the tail and Jabba going, "Eek," like in pain, like where you have Han just casually just walking around. I love that. And I want to see the creature express pain and anger, but can't do anything because Han's not. Han's got the blaster. But
Okay.
it's just for that scene that I like these specialized editions. Is because I like George's vision, but most of all, I love that scene. I just love seeing Jabba just get humiliated by Han.
And that's one thing that George was right. That CGI isn't the all and be all and all, but it's a tool, and that is something that I could appreciate. That they
Well, what I liked was that because I saw a lot of the behind the scenes stuff on episode 1, 2, and 3, he gets accused of using the green screen too much, but he actually combined it with actual theater sets a lot of the time. Like Geonosis has a lot of theater sets, sand pits and whatnot that he had made. So it's something that I, like I really do like that. Although I will run to bat for a lot of the sets in episode 4, 5, and 6. I really like those sets. I really like seeing, especially in episode 6, the sets where, like in the Imperial Throne Room. I really like that, and that's something that's a scene I love very much. like everything there and the hangar. I really love those scenes. So I like it. I think George does his best work when he combines the two together.
And I think that's something that Lucas doesn't get that as much credit over, because he pushes all of these techniques
To their limit.
blends them together, and it really.
But you see, the problem is with the sequels is that, and everything that's come after episode 3 is that um, it's lacking George. Only Lucas can do what he can do. It's just like,
I believe that too.
yeah, okay. It's just like, who else can combine, like, even when he had access to all the CGI technology with Star Wars Episode 3, he still insisted on a lot of sets. And he had, like, he kept a lot of the sets from Episode 2. He still used them. But, like, this is something you have to kind of do. You need a combination. But the problem is, the other thing is, what I like is that he didn't just use the CGI in Episode 3 looked better than anything in the past 10 years. And now it just looks so cheap and plastic. Whereas with George, there's almost a griminess in some scenes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how do I put it? Um, uh, the ship in Episode 3 that Obi-Wan and Anakin break into, where Grievous, like his flagship, it looks grimy in a few places. It looks lived in. It looks like people actually have to go fetch coffee in there. And I could believe that, like, an entire crew have to live on that for months on end. I could believe it. And, like, you've got Utapau, you've got even, like, Mustafar to an extent. There are lived-in elements. And it's like only George understands how to do that with science fiction. It's just so unique.
I think one of the things you find as a writer, I remember when I first started as a writer, I used to be scared stiff of telling people my stories in case they'd pinch the idea or go off and write them. And then I very soon realized only you can write your stories, or you can tell people whatever, but they're not going to be able to. They're not going to be able to do it, and I think that shows in Star Wars more than anything, really. As in, like, um, you've got the original trilogy, then you've got the prequels, and they're all George Lucas, and then everything that everybody else does after that is something different, no matter what they call it or how much they try to integrate them. I mean, I think finally with Andor season 2, possibly with Rogue, is it called Rogue One, the other film? They're finally starting to get it, but they're hanging on the coattails. They're not. When they tried to do something completely different, when they tried to break away and say, okay, we're going to do Ahsoka or what the other one, the one that got cancelled, they were just absolute disasters, because they didn't have that. They couldn't get into the feeling of George Lucas's vision. They started trying to do their own thing within that sandbox. Let's say there was, okay, Star Wars, we can do whatever we want with it. Let's have this happen, and it doesn't work. You know what I mean? Because you have to have that George Lucas's idea of what you're doing in there. You know what I mean? You can't just take any archetype, drop it in there, and give them their own adventure. It's got to be within sort of reason. You've got to follow those rules. Maybe that's what I think of it. I don't know what you guys think.
I think that's exactly it. I don't think Rogue One worked, but I'm a Jedi Knight fan, so I like how Kyle Katarn breaks in to the fortress on Kuat, seizes the Death Star plans, and escapes before Vader can show up. But then again, I didn't like Rogue One also because I was just thinking, wait, Vader knows they have the Death Star plans. Why doesn't he just crush a good chunk of the fortress on them, or just go force? Thanks for the plans.
Okay.
It's Vader lost his brain, and I'm like, why isn't he just? I don't understand. But whereas with Andor, the sexual assault thing just had me turned off. Like,
yeah,
you can hint at it. You can cut to black of Star Wars. We've kind of experienced that sort of stuff in Star Wars, but you can't show it on screen. Like, you could have, like, Chris Higgins, who I do a couple of Star Wars podcasts with, he proposed what they could have done was have him, like look at her and you have that gleam in his eyes. You cut to outside
I
and
totally agree. I totally agree. When I saw that scene, I was like, "Oh, come on! Is this the best they can think of? Is this the best they can do? Like
yeah,
to get from where they want to, from where they are to where they want to be. This is the best they can do. Like some guy's just going to turn up and assault her. Yeah, I agree. I agree. I was sitting there going, "Oh, really? This again?"
yeah. And the problem is that this sort of scene has become the norm, and it's the go-to. The thing is, in 2011, when we saw this sort of stuff with Game of Thrones, it
Yeah.
was surprising and shocking. But we've seen it every month since then, in every TV show, every franchise. It doesn't shock anymore. It actually kind of bores us all to tears. And it, like the thing is, um, the only time I ever got shocked by a drama kind of approaching that was Taira no Kiyomori, where the titular character, who's based off the first great, the founder of the first samurai government of Japan. Well, he comes on to the widow of his rival, which he did historically. But the thing is, the shocking thing is, it seems like it's going to be sexual assault. But then she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm up for it. I want to do it." She's like, she happily, and you're like, "Wait." The shocking part is not that he's sexually assaulted; it's that she's turned it around and turned it into seduction, and she almost assaults him, and it's like,
Okay.
wait, that didn't, like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And then
So yeah,
but
a little
for
bit
the end,
deconstructed, more turned around.
yeah, where he pressed her down, and he's like, I'm gonna have my way with you, and you have her, please, look at him, love, it's like, and you have the character himself looking like, what? And, then she pulls him down towards her, and it's like cut to black, and the end credits for that episode, and you were like, well, damn, well played.
Didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, and you're like that. Yeah, and you're like, well, that's a great way to do it. But
Yeah.
the thing with these sort of scenes, we keep seeing them over and over again, and
Yeah.
it stopped being shocking. It's just at this point, it's like, yeah, okay, the mandatory sexual assault scene, got it. We got to have in every movie, every TV show.
Yeah. And do we really have to have it? Especially in
No,
Andor, was it really necessary? They could have done something very different. You know what I mean? When I write the ending to a book, like when I wrote the ending to The Shark in the Park, I try and look at every single way that I can end it. So I go from, okay, let's say the shark eats the kid. That's the ultimate shock ending. And then let's go to, let's say the kid befriends the shark. So then you have all these little different things in between, and you can choose something that works. You know what I mean? Rather than going, okay, sexual assault. You know what I mean? We'll just throw that in there because it's in everything. And it didn't fit. It was the only thing in Andor I remember sitting there thinking, and you could see it coming. You could see it coming, like maybe even the episode before, because the guy turns up and sort of goes, "Oh, I like you," kind of thing, and you're sitting there watching, going, "Oh no, they're gonna do this." You know what I mean? Like, and it did, and it was like a slow motion car crash, and then you knew she was going to fight him off, and that was going to cause the ruckus, that was going to cause the problems with what the Imperials on the planet and the others. No, not for me. It could have been done. They could have done something else. You know what I mean? It could have tried to steal her wallet or steal her technology or something like anything really would have been better. You know, guys, I've lost you. But this actually is the perfect time to wrap up because it's now we've been on an hour. So I just want to say to everyone who's tuned in, thank you very much for joining us. This was the first live recording of our podcast. I also want to tell you guys, before you go, if you would like to buy a copy of my book, this is Crybaby. This is my first serial novel. which is available on Amazon. It was published here originally on Substack, and now is actually available for you guys to buy in paperback, on Kindle, and audiobook. And thank you very much. Today we covered the basics of Star Wars. We covered our experiences with Star Wars and how we came about, how we came into it. And maybe next time we'll talk about a specific film, and we'll talk about the things we enjoy and the things we don't enjoy. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Good night.